So finally, we get to see the Entwives. I bet Treebeard's very excited about that, if you know what I mean. How do trees have sex? Hello, interwebs! I hope you're all doing well, and welcome to the latest review of The Lord of the Rings, The Rings of Power. This one, episode 4 of season 2, titled Eldest. And I had to say, when I saw that title, Eldest, I was like, do they now owe like a check to Christopher Paolini? Because that's an inheritance cycle book title, not a Lord of the Rings one. So it kind of works within the context of the episode, but I was rather shocked to see them using that, because it just makes me think of an entire other fantasy series that is very much based on Tolkien/Star Wars. So it was just a weird choice. That being said, I ended up really liking this episode. Let's talk overall first, and then I'll get into some more nitty-gritty with the episode. Overall, I think this is another solid episode, but it is running into the problems that I had with the first season of Lord of the Rings: Ring of Power, or at least one specifically, and kind of more generally an issue that I've been having with streaming series generally over the past, half a decade, if not longer. And that is, the pace is so glacially slow. I've been thinking about this more and more lately about like TV shows from the 90s and early 2000s, where it's like, yeah, we have like 24 episodes, and yet each episode seems like it was moving things forward. Even in shows that had like a singular story, like I think something like Lost. I think just the structure of Lost, which like focused on a single character per episode, allowed it to feel like it had forward momentum, even if the actual plot itself wasn't moving forward. Stands at the beginning of season 3 where they're all in those cages. And streaming shows overall, and I think that this is very much present here in this episode, just constantly are stretching out one story over 8 episodes, and they try to obfuscate it with a bunch of plots happening, but you just really feel like nothing's happening at all. And I sit here and look at this episode, and I think about what actually happened in it. There's a lot that I like, and I'll talk about that in a second, but I ultimately am like, all of these scenes, all of the moments that we get throughout this episode really could have been like 20 minutes of another episode, or like 20 minutes of a movie, and didn't need to be stretched out this long. And again, what we're getting, I enjoy, especially as a Tolkien fan. Like, I feel like this was the Tolkien fan service episode for many of the things that I in particular really wanted to see, that I've been excited to see in Tolkien for a very long time. And it's done well for the most part, but it just like, I didn't need to sit here and revel in it for so long. This is a generalized complaint. This is not just a Rings of Power problem, but is one I'm really, really feeling. And we're halfway into the season, and frankly, not a ton has happened. I've enjoyed it generally, but not a ton has happened plot-wise. And I'm like, we can speed this up. We can do more. And it makes me wonder, like, what their 5-season plan was. Sorry, I keep mentioning in my reviews nowadays. But I'm pitching my own show, Identities, and I have a 3-season plan for that show. And I'm like, every single season, like the plan that I have for it, the status quo completely changes. Like, everything changes, and we're doing something new and have a new goal and new end in mind for every sort of story beat that I have for that. And I just look at this show and I'm like, what's the goal for the season? Is it just getting to the Rings of Power getting made, like the Dwarven rings and the Elven, or Dwarven rings and human rings, and then we'll deal with more stuff after that, because that's not a lot of plot, and so everything just seems like to be in stasis while Celebrimbor and Anatar/Sauron are making the rings, and it's just kind of frustratingly slow. And also, this episode kind of focuses on plots that I'm not too interested in, because, and let's start getting into specifics here, the plots that I'm actually really loving in this season, that I really enjoy just being within, is the Dwarven plot. I actually really like the Celebrimbor Sauron stuff, and then we do get in this episode some Elven stuff that I really do enjoy, and I think is the strongest, or close to the strongest stuff in this episode, but it's not moving forward at a pace that I really, really love. Getting into some specifics, let's start with that positive there, the Elven storyline. I really do like the dynamic between Elrond and Galadriel, as they're sort of having different ideas about how the rings work. And what's interesting to me, as we see at the end of this episode too, is we do know that Elrond, unless I'm misremembering, ends up with a ring. And so I'm curious to see how Elrond moved from being so against the rings to actually putting one on. If it's something out of begrudgingly done, something he earnestly believes needs to be done. Like, there's an interesting arc there, even as someone who knows what's coming, to think about where Elrond's going to go. And I like his constant trying to see Galadriel's humanity and see her as a friend, and yet also knowing that she might be more interested in the rings and the power that it gives her and protecting that than an earnest desire to fight Sauron or to be herself. And you see him struggling with that in that really good scene between the two of them where she asks him, like, promise me you'll put Sauron ahead of everything besides even myself. And he's like, I can't make that promise, but I'll try and do it for you. And you know, my partner and I laughed at it when we saw that scene because it was like, oh, I'm never going to promise to do that, but I'll promise to do that. But I think it comes down to him trying to be like, I see you as a person and I want that to be the focus, but we can't, I can't fully trust that. And I do like that drama. Also in this episode that I really, really love, this gets into the Tolkien fan service of it, we got to see the Barrow Wights. Holy crap. I love the Barrow Wights. I've read the books when I was really, really younger, but one of my favorite memories of Tolkien is they had these audio dramas, I think the Mind's Eye audio dramas, you can look them up here on YouTube, that are really great adaptations of Tolkien. And those adaptations are super scary at certain points, like Mirkwood in the Hobbit book. When they do those, it's super scary. And the Barrow Wights that they do after they meet the Fellowship in the Fellowship of the Ring, where Frodo and all the hobbits get stuck in a Barrow Wight, was one of the creepiest moments in all of Lord of the Rings for me. And I was really sad when it was not included in the Fellowship of the Ring movie, especially since it is kind of a character moment for Frodo where he can choose to abandon his friends or not. I get why, because if you're excluding Tom Bombadil, who we'll get to in this review later, it kind of doesn't work as well without him there to do the Barrow Wights, but I was kind of sad not to see it because it was just one of the cool horror parts of Tolkien that I really love. Like, whenever Tolkien does horror, I love it, and a lot of the movies don't nail the horror for me. I think of like the Hobbit movies as well. They kind of made Mirkwood more of like a druggy trip rather than a horror thing, and I was kind of disappointed in that. Even generally liking the first two Hobbit movies. Liking, not loving. So getting to see the Barrow Wights here was really cool. I think they did them fairly well. Like, it's not as scary as I would have liked it to be, but I could see this if you're like a kid watching this show and seeing that could fuck you up a little bit. Like the eyes in the background of the Barrow Wights at certain points, really creepy. Loved that. Them coming out and then like their weapons doing nothing. Really, really cool. It looked gorgeous for like a CGI recreation. Like TV budgets, you can definitely see that they're putting the budget on screen with these things. And so I thought that all worked really well. Loved the Barrow Wights. And I also did like the end of this story where Galadriel gives Elrond the ring and goes and sacrifices herself, supposedly, and before running into Adar, and we'll see where that goes in the next episode. But Elrond sort of thinking like, well, she didn't really do this for us, she did this to protect the ring, and that going back to the idea that we were having before. So all of that stuff, while I do think is kind of slow-paced and is not getting us to the Celebrimbor stuff that they're going towards, and we ultimately know the season is going towards, and I think could have been sped up faster, it is good, and I do generally like it. Let's get to a section that I have more critiques on with this episode, and that would be the Tom Bombadil stuff, because we have the Stranger finally meeting up with Tom Bombadil, and I was super excited when I heard that Tom Bombadil was going to be in the season. Tom Bombadil, if you don't know, it was a cut section from the Fellowship of the Ring, and he is one of, if not the most powerful being in all of Middle Earth, but he's just like a weird dude who like jumps around the forest like, I'm Tom Bombadil, I'm doing weird stuff. He can resist the ring, he can do whatever, and he just fucks around the forest, and I love him. And this adaptation of Tom Bombadil is it kind of leans into like the more like grounded, gritty reboot of Tom Bombadil because he just has a very melancholic feel to him, and I always imagine Tom Bombadil to be a lot more impish, like kind of jumping around and like hee like that sort of idea to him. And here he's just kind of played like, yeah, this area's desert, and like, yes, he would be sad, but like the way he's written in Tolkien is much more joyous. And again, I am very much someone like you can adapt things to your own story. It doesn't have to like I'm someone to like take the things on its own terms rather than some people. And again, I think this is a fair critique if it bothers you, but I like trying to see like what are they going to do with this rather than like saying but there is a disappointment in me in not seeing that version of Bombadil. And what we get here is fine, but it doesn't really excite me, and I think that's what kind of disappoints me more, is just like, oh, it's Tom Bombadil and he's just a kind of sad guy living in the woods. There's some cool stuff in this, like we get to see Old Man Ironwood like sucking the Stranger into the tree, which was like a cool Tolkien-esque sort of thing that we've seen in other elements. I think like if it's been in other stories, but if you watch the extended edition of The Two Towers, is that moment where Pippin and Merry get pulled into the tree there in one of those extended scenes from that film. And Treebird has to save them. So I think that like, yeah, that fits Tolkien's world very well. It's cool to see. It was kind of existential horror-y. There's a lot of things in this episode, I'm just realizing, like, there's a weird recurring motif of, like, people getting sucked into things and getting not being able to get out of them, like the barrow wights, the tree, and then also the like mud, like the quicksand mud that we see later on in the episode. So I guess that's just a weird motif of the episode that just was unintended. But yeah, so Tom Bombadil, we get to see his wife, or like hear his wife. It's I forget what she's, the Woman of the River or something like that. I forget exactly who she is in the books. It's been a minute, but we get to see. I know that she's a character in Tom Bombadil's life, and I like that she's kind of like heard, but Tom Bombadil's not saying anything about her. Adds a little bit more of that like creepy kind of strangeness to Tom Bombadil, and it is interesting if Tom Bombadil's like the one who's gonna like be the trainer for the stranger and sort of teach him to become a wizard. I think that'd be an interesting dynamic. So I hope that gets us a little bit into more of the fun of Tom Bombadil in the next few episodes. The other storyline that we get here that again had a token fan service moment that I liked, but it's the storyline I care the least about, is Arondir and Isildur going to save Theo along with, I forget her name, the woman that's there with them, who's hiding the fact that she's been part of Sauron's army. That element of it where this lady is trying to pretend that she was not part of Sauron's army, and Arondir and Isildur discovering that, I don't really have much investment in. It's mostly because she just got introduced for all intents and purposes like last episode, and I don't have a lot of investment in like, oh, she's gonna betray them, and it feels like something that the character of Bronwyn was maybe going to be used for or have a different element in, because I don't see Bronwyn necessarily, like, it would have been interesting, Bronwyn, a character we have from season 1, maybe choosing to side with Sauron just to protect herself and her son, and kind of having that conversation about what's the pragmatic thing to do and why people end up in horrific situations like that because they don't have any other choice, really. And that would have been a much more complicated storyline because we knew Bronwyn, she had an emotional attachment already to Arondir, but here it's just a character that's being given to Isildur. Isildur I didn't really care about all that much already, and she's just a new character, so this like betrayal aspect doesn't really land for me. And I think it's just trying to switch things up because the Bronwyn actor left the show, and just not as solid. So all of that stuff, I'm like, fine, it's fine. Her possibly leaving them to die and things like that, but doesn't hit as hard. What I did really love is we did get the quick mud moment with a creature that reminded me of the creature from outside the Mines of Moria, or not Mines of Moria, Khazad-dûm in Fellowship of the Ring. So that was cool to see. But even more so, we get to see the Ents and the Entwives. It was really cool to see an Entwife, and I love her like kind of smile as Arondir apologizes to her. And I think this felt like the most Tolkien to me of an elf apologizing to a tree for the harm that he caused to the forest and not being willing to lie about it and saying, yes, I have cut down trees. Yes, I have used them for fuel and building things and stuff like that. And the Ents being very much like, what the actual hell, and being willing to kill him over that. That feels very Tolkien, and it has that Tolkien's sort of environmentalism that he used the Ents to sort of filter that through, and how the world, the land wants to fight back against corruption and power and people trying to like destroy it, how Earth itself will fight back against us. And I thought that seeing an elf talking about finding a better balance and apologizing to them, that felt so Tolkien to me. And then again, doing it through an Entwife was just very, very funny. I did enjoy that. There's some patriarchy in there, in that like, oh, the Entwife can't just be an Ent. She has to be an Entwife, and she has to be owned by the other Ent. So yeah, I'm not gonna get on that horse. That's just me being a joking like kind of person, like, oh, feminism. Yes, it's there, but who the hell cares? It was cool to see an Entwife. One final segment of this episode that we need to talk about is Poppy and Nori. They run into another group of Harfoots who are also very like, get them out of here, we don't want to care about you, which feels like that's just, I guess, part of the Harfoot culture of like, we're very insular, which kind of makes sense given where we see that where the Harfoots go with the hobbits in the Shire, where the hobbits are not like hating outsiders, but they don't like want people coming in and ruining the nice little creature comforts that they have, that more like suburban upper middle class sort of vibe that we get with them. I think like a culture that sort of is like, yeah, we don't really want to deal with outsiders, get out of our hair sort of thing works less when you're a nomadic people, being like, if you don't catch up with us, get the fuck out of here, that we saw in season 1. But here it kind of works. What I do really love though is the connection that we get to learn between these groups of Harfoots living in ruin with the group of Harfoots that we saw last season, with their leader Burrows kind of going out and searching for some place to finally live. And I liked seeing this idea that they originally, this group of Harfoots left this group to go and find a home because they had like a vision of the Shire essentially, but not finding it. And then over the centuries, they just becoming a nomadic people that kind of have forgotten their origins. And it's only carried on in songs like the walking song on how to get back home. And it recontextualizing the Wandering Day song as not just a story of how to get through ruin, but a way to get back home to where they were. That's really, really cool, because as much as I liked the song being used to give directions idea, it was sort of like, oh, the song that they happen to always sing also happens to be like the song that will help them in this situation. It was not a song referring to anywhere else in the world, but it makes much more sense now that we know that song was a way to get back home. And that I really, really love. I think that that's a beautiful Tolkien-esque idea, and it is one that sort of adds a cool, interesting context to like the sort of, I guess you'd call them the nomadic people of the Harfoots and where they're eventually going. And I thought that was just a really cool way to connect all of this. And it was just nice to see different cultures of hobbits, because we get alluded to that in some ways here and there in Lord of the Rings, but mostly it's just the hobbits in the Shire. So to get to see like different cultural elements of the Harfoots, I really did enjoy. Again, I sit here wondering like, where's it going plot-wise? But as a cultural world-building element, I really, really love it. And that's kind of where I want to end on this review. I think that's where I'm sitting, is the plot of the season is just slow-paced, kind of frustrating. I do ultimately wonder if the end of the season is really going to feel like haven't gone very far for an entire season of a show, which is just a streaming service problem in general. However, the elements of this show that are just getting to show us some cool Tolkien stuff, adding in its own lore that I think resonates with Tolkien in a fun way for me, I'm really, really enjoying. And while I have some negatives like the depiction of Tom Bombadil, none of it is overtly bad in my mind. So like again, I think this is just going to be a show for me where I'm like, it's a show that I know is not amazing. It's not fantastic. It's not going to rock your socks off. But as someone who just enjoys existing in the Middle Earth, I think this show does a really good job of capturing that magic and feel of Tolkien, even though some people argue, oh, it's a vandalism of Tolkien. I think it does really capture that magic of it in a very slow-paced, kind of just enjoying being here way that I particularly enjoy. I enjoy it a decent amount. So yeah, like I said, if you're focused on plot and story, and very much as someone who is that, I find it frustrating. But there are stuff here that I like just as a Tolkien fan that I just enjoy existing in the world of. And I think they're doing a great job of capturing those things. But yeah, I'd love to hear all your thoughts down in the comments below. What do you think of episode 4? Beyond all that, I hope you all, my friends, live long and prosper.